Okay, so here I consider the high-dimensional linear regression model. So y equal x beta plus epsilon. X here is a fixed design matrix. P is larger than n, which means that the number of explanatory variables is larger than the number of observations. And I have a parameter beta, which is sparse. And our aim is to recover location of non-null component of beta, or more precisely to recover which component of beta is non-negative, which component of beta is null, and which component of beta is non-positive, that is the sign of beta. Here I consider the lasso estimator. So the lasso estimator is defined as the minimizer with respect to b of the residual sum of square plus the penalty term. The penalty term is the L1 norm scaled by the tuning parameter lambda. So in this talk, I always assume that the lasso minimizer is unique, and I denoted it at beta of lambda. And lasso estimator is well known to be a sparse estimator. So it means some component of lasso are exactly equal to 0. And that's the reason why this estimator is frequently used to recover the location of non-null component of beta, or also used for sign recovery of beta. Basis pursuit estimator, given here, is defined as follows. So among the solution of the linear system of equation y equal xb, we pick a solution b for which the L1 norm is minimal. And actually, these two estimators are closely related. You can think about the basis pursuit as actually lasso estimator when the tuning parameter lambda is infinitely small. Okay, when y is actually as a continuous distribution, for example, when y is a response of a Gaussian linear model, almost surely basis pursuit estimators has exactly n non-null components. And that's probably the reason why we do not use directly basis pursuit for sign recovery or to recover the location of non-null components of beta. But as illustrated by Odd, actually, by thresholding basis pursuits, we are able actually to recover the sign of beta, and I'm going to say a few words about that. So first, I am in the noiseless case, so I have y equal x beta, exactly. There is no epsilon currently. And I say that I want to recover beta. And I think that the most natural way to recover beta in the noiseless case using a convex optimization approach is by solving the basis pursuit optimization problem, by solving this problem. And actually, basis pursuit can recover the sign of beta if and only if the identifiability condition holds. Thus, we have this implications. As actually this identifiability condition just depend from the sign of beta, which means that if beta is identifiable, then a vector having the same sign as beta is also identifiable. And if beta is not identifiable, then a vector having the same sign as beta is also not identifiable. So still in the noiseless case, I consider lasso optimization problem. So this optimization problem. And actually lasso, in the noiseless case, can recover the sign of beta if and only if the irrepresentability condition holds. So if and only we have this inequality. And in addition, if non-null component of beta are sufficiently large. Intuitively, we can understand this additional assumption on beta, non-null component are sufficiently large. When component of beta are small, actually y is close to 0. When y is close to 0, then the lasso estimator is exactly equal to 0. And when the lasso estimator is exactly equal to 0, lasso estimator does not recover the sign of beta. Now, I'm going to say I'm no longer consider the noiseless case, so epsilon is no longer equal to 0, and I give this result of Van Wright. So Why is the response in this theorem? Why is the response of a linear regression model? And Wainwright proves that the irrepresentability condition is necessary for sign recovery by lasso. Or more precisely, when this inequality holds, which is the irrepresentability condition does not hold, then the probability of sign recovery by lasso is for sure smaller than 1/2, and this whatever the value of lambda. And we also prove that actually when this inequality holds, so when the irrepresentability condition holds, then beta is identifiable with respect to x and the L1 norm. And actually, we are going to see that this condition, irrepresentability condition, it's much stronger than the identifiability condition. So here in this figure, this one on the left, the x-axis represents the sparsity, and the black curves, for a given case, the black curves give the proportion of sign vector which satisfies the identifiability condition. And the red curves provide for a given value of k, so k represents the number of non-null components, the proportion of sign vector having exactly k non-null components, which satisfies the irrepresentability condition. So first you may notice that the red curve is below the black curves. It's not surprising because irrepresentability condition implies identifiability condition. In addition, you may see that the gap between these two curves is actually big. It means that irrepresentability condition is much stronger than identifiability condition. And here, actually, I draw these curves for a particular observation of a standard Gaussian matrix. And when the matrix is standard Gaussian, actually, we are able to approximate well these two curves, irrepresentability curve and identifiability curve. So in particular, this according to this expression, this one, when k is roughly when k is smaller than 9, the irrepresentability condition holds. And actually 9 is the x-axis of the dotted red line here. And roughly when k is larger than 9, the irrepresentability condition does not hold. And we also have a second approximation. We can also approximate the identifiability condition using this expression. In this expression, rho is related to the phase transition curve, a curve introduced by Dono and Tanner, actually. And using these curves, we discover that we can notice that when the sparsity is smaller than 31, roughly the identifiability condition occurs. And when the sparsity is strictly larger than 31, then the identifiability condition does not hold. So I say that, Now I consider a second case in which X is a matrix for which columns are extremely correlated. So for this particular experiment, X is a matrix for which columns are almost all equal. And I draw again the identifiability and irrepresentability curves. So on the x-axis, it's k, the sparsity, the number of non-null components, and you may notice that even when k is equal 1, looking at the irrepresentability curve in red, you may notice that some sign vectors for which there is just one non-null component does not satisfy the irrepresentability condition. So it means that in this case, irrepresentability condition is extremely strong condition. Whereas you may notice that actually identifiability condition seems to be unaffected. So if you look at the black curves in this figure and the black curve in the figure just before this one, they are almost identical. So we have illustrated that actually identifiability is really a much stronger condition than irrepresentability is a much stronger condition than identifiability condition, and also that identifiability condition seems to be unaffected by the correlation structure of the matrix X. And I said previously that we can recover with lasso. Identify irrepresentability condition is actually a necessary condition for sign recovery by lasso. And we are going to see that actually identifiability condition, which is much weaker, is actually necessary and sufficient condition for sign recovery by thresholded lasso and thresholded basis pursuit. So we have this theorem. So here y represents the response of a linear regression model. X is a fixed matrix, beta is an unknown parameter, sparse. And the estimator at beta can represent the lasso estimator or the basis pursuit estimator. And we have this statement. If beta is not identifiable, so with respect to X and the L1 norm, then at least one non-null component of beta has its sign which is not correctly estimated by the estimator at beta. So it means that we have this inequality. And you may notice that as soon as I have this inequality for the one component of at beta, even after thresholding estimate at beta, this inequality remains true. So it means that lasso, thresholded lasso, and thresholded basis pursuit cannot recover the sign of beta when beta is not identifiable with respect to X and the L1 norm. Second case, I assume that if beta is identifiable and actually non-null components of beta are very large, then there is actually the estimator at beta separates non-positive, null, and non-negative components of beta. Thus, we have this chain of inequalities. To be more precise, non-positive components of beta are estimated non-positively by the estimator at beta and very large. Null components of beta are estimated at 0 or by a small value by the estimator at beta. And non-negative components of beta are estimated non-negatively and very large by the estimator at beta. Thus, because null components of beta are estimated at 0 or by a small value by the estimator at beta, it means that by thresholding estimator at beta, we can recover the sign of beta, or if you prefer, by thresholding lasso or by thresholding basis pursuit estimate, we can recover which component of beta is negative, which component of beta is null, and which component of beta is positive. I think that actually this statement is quite intuitive, at least for basis pursuit. If I think about basis pursuit, when I say if beta is identifiable, I mean actually that in the nonetheless case, when there is no epsilon, basis pursuit can recover the sign of beta. Then, in the when epsilon is no longer equal to 0, but the sign to noise ratio, the signal to noise ratio is infinitely large. It's not surprising that basis pursuit can still recover a non-null component of beta, and null component of beta in the are estimated by small value by basis pursuit. So it's not surprising also that by thresholding basis pursuit, we're able to recover the sign of beta. Okay. So to summarize, with lasso, one can recover the sign of beta only if the irrepresentability condition holds. So if we have this inequality. And with thresholded lasso or thresholded basis pursuit, one recovers the sign of beta if and only if the identifiability condition holds. That's if we have this implication. And as I illustrated before, irrepresentability condition is actually implies identifiability condition, and actually this condition, the irrepresentability condition, is much stronger than identifiability condition. So it means in practice, it's not relevant to use just use lasso for sign recovery. It's much better for sign recovery to use thresholded lasso or thresholded basis pursuit. Now I'm going to say a few words about how to select a threshold for both Basis Pursuit and Lasso. And the strategy is a bit similar than the one developed by Odd, actually. So I assume that X is actually particular observation of a standard Gaussian matrix. So I have a particular X, I have a response Y, and the lambda is fixed, is given. And the idea is actually to add to the matrix X an extra column generated according to a standard Gaussian distribution. So I have a column Z, and the lasso component associated to Z, or the basis pursuit component associated to Z, given in this buff problem actually, are for this buff estimator an estimation of a null component. And if you have a lot of estimation of a null component with lasso or basis pursuit, we're able to calibrate the threshold as explained actually here. So to conclude, I'm going to give additional numerical experiments. So here I have Y equals, so is a response of a linear Gaussian regression model. X is a fixed matrix generated according to a standard Gaussian distribution. Epsilon is a standard noise, and beta has exactly 20 non-null components. So 20 non-null components. I just come back a bit. So here, when so the sparsity is equal to 20, and when the sparsity is equal to 20, we know that the identifiability condition occurs. So we are here. And thus we know in this setting that contrarily to lasso, thresholded lasso and thresholded basis pursuit can exactly recover the sign of beta. And actually, a non-null component of beta are all equal and equal to t. So on the left, the figure, the x-axis represents t, which how large is the non-null component of beta, and the y-axis represents the Famille-Loisel error rate, which is the probability to do not estimate at zero a null component of beta. Yes, at least one null component of beta. You may notice that empirically, using our strategy to compute a threshold, approximately we control Famille-Loisel error rate at level 5% with both thresholded basis pursuit and thresholded lasso. And now, if we look at the figure on the right, you may notice that so the x-axis still represents t, how large is the non-null component of beta. The y-axis represents the probability of sign recovery. And you may notice that when t is large, the probability of sign recovery by thresholded basis pursuit and thresholded lasso is for both estimator close to 95%. 1 minus the Famille-Loisel error rate, actually. So, before to conclude this, this presentation, so I want to say that this presentation, it's a presentation about the article on the sign recovery by lasso, thresholded lasso, and threshold basis pursuit denoising. And I'm going to add on the chat a link to this article, so the last version of this article. And I want to say a few words about a related article of Ulrike Schneider and myself. So in particular, in this last article, you may find, so first you may find a necessary and sufficient condition for uniqueness of lasso, a necessary and sufficient condition for uniqueness of basis pursuit. But you may find also geometrical characterization of this implication, an additional result concerning sign recovery by both lasso and basis pursuit. And also, to conclude, next week I will have the opportunity to give a talk on this article. So thank you, and now I'm available to reply your question.